And the fact that Ben had you up there rather than a 19-year-old freshman, sociology undergrad, I think that speaks to the fact that we have to be taken a bit more seriously in direct confrontation.
Refusing to engage in these debates demonstrates weakness. And even if you're not a weak person, it certainly comes off as weak. And I'm not in any way intimidated regarding debate, especially with someone like Ben Shapiro.
Hello, Anna.
Hey, what's up?
Not much. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Just trying to get through the day,
Yeah,
as
it's
always.
you're on the East Coast, right?
No, I'm on the West Coast. I'm in LA.
Oh, I didn't know that. I just assumed that all of the suit and tie independent media types lived over in New York because that's been the
Do I come across as a suit and tie independent media type person?
Okay, it's very relative, okay? Listen, you're not
Yeah.
an anime t-shirt wearing independent media person, which is where I'm at. So you're a few rungs above me, and that all feels suit and tie-esque, you know?
Yeah, I get it. I totally get it. Sometimes I feel like, I don't know, not out of touch, but I feel like I just like to dress nice and have like a clean on-air presence, for lack of a better description. But I hope I'm like not too stuffy or buttoned up. Like, I'm not
No,
really
no, no. And you have, by the way, you're talking to the wrong person on this, okay? Because I recently, with COVID, I haven't been able to go to any of these political conferences, but I went to my first one just a few weeks ago, and I wore a suit and a turtleneck. So my first opportunity, I dressed in the stuffiest imaginable in Nashville weather too. So I'm like
Oh
sweating
my
like a
God.
right, yeah, exactly. So completely inappropriate, but no, we all appreciate your sense of style.
Thank you. Thank you.
um okay, yeah, so I mean, I think anyone worth their salt knows who you are, but just in case there are some people who like me for my video game, streams, would you mind telling everyone?
Yeah, so I'm Ana Kasparian. I am the executive producer and host of The Young Turks, which is an online news and politics network now. It's been around since 2002. I joined in 2007, and I've been there ever since. So every once in a while, I'll look back and feel pretty ancient because I've been at the company for nearly 15 years. In April, it'll be 15.
Yeah, 2007 really is like dinosaur years in terms of online media.
Mhm.
Which is wild to think about. I wanted to talk to you about, okay, like a dozen things. The easiest thing would be to segue into online media because I just said that, but honest to God, I want to talk about that Ben Shapiro debate.
Okay.
First off, I so that was a sweet gig. I mean, that was a must have been like a huge get. Did you reach out to them or did they reach out to you? How'd you facilitate that?
So, I'll tell you the backstory. I definitely didn't reach out to anyone. In fact, I don't know if it hurts me or helps me, but I'm usually pretty hesitant about doing anything. Like I just do my job and it's so overwhelming day to day that like when I get requests for other things, even if there's like, positive exposure involved, I'll usually be hesitant about it because I just want some time to myself. But they reached out and I had wanted to debate Ben Shapiro at like a previous Politicon, and he didn't want to do it since he had already debated Cenk. Even though Cenk and I are obviously different people, I kind of wanted to do it myself.
You look
So
so
when,
similar too. It's hard to tell sometimes.
so TYT is represented by an agency. And so I guess the Pennsylvania Chamber of Commerce reached out to the agents representing TYT, who I had never really talked to previously. And they asked if I'd be interested in doing it. And so I immediately said yes, because I just find it enjoyable to be able to debate my ideas and not have to worry about hurting anyone's feelings when I do. Sometimes I feel like the left can be a little bit of an echo chamber. The only thing they tend to disagree about is like ridiculous, you know, behavior policing. So it was like, oh, I get to debate a conservative. Sure. So I said yes. It got postponed because it was supposed to happen in 2020, but because of the pandemic, they decided to postpone it. And then I just kind of assumed it wasn't going to happen. But sure enough, it ended up happening, and I enjoyed it way more than I expected to.
Yeah, it was really fun to watch. Did you I gotta know, did you like skid on in for the debate and then run out, or were you able to mingle before and after with all the you know, blood diamond suit and tie econ business types, you know?
Right. So this whole trip to Pennsylvania actually cut into my vacation time.
Oh,
So I lost 2 days of my vacation time to do it. So I was kind of in and out, but I flew in the day before, and then they asked if I wanted to, sit at the head table with the head of like the PA Chamber of Commerce and all these people. Usually I'd say no, but I decided to say yes because I assumed that Ben would also be sitting there, and I didn't want to be like the weirdo eating my meal in the green room while
right.
they're like at the head table. So
The
I
yeah,
said yes.
you're like hunched in the air duct with your hors d'oeuvres, you know, like quietly. Yeah.
But I'm glad I did that because I did want to get to know them, mostly to pick their brains about a lot of different things that I've been curious about. For instance, I've always assumed that the business community, despite the Trump era tax cuts, actually despise Trump. They're just not allowed to say it publicly. And sure enough, they hate Trump. They find him to be an unstable an unstable element to the government, and they don't like instability. They just want to ensure that they increase their profits. So while they seemed very grateful for the tax cuts, they also hated the disinformation regarding vaccines because they want their workers back in the
Yeah, that
mines,
hits
and
them too. Yeah.
it hits them exactly. So it's fascinating. It's really interesting to like walk into the belly of the beast and understand how their logic really works, who they really are. On a personal level, they're all lovely. It's just that we disagree vehemently on policy because at the end of the day, their number one priority and concern is maximizing profits.
Material interests, right? It's
Right.
frustrating because, you know, I've talked to a few people like that. You'd think logically, because a lot of them are socially progressive, you know, logically, you'd think it would carry over. Like, if you believe in human dignity and rights for this, that, and the other, then you think, okay, well, maybe people shouldn't have to, you know, like juggle knives to get 60 cents an hour, whatever the hell else they're doing out there in the modern economy. But they cut off right there. I mean, people will self-rationalize, I think a lot of really bad policy stuff if it's beneficial to them, you know?
Yeah. Well, this was Pennsylvania, so they were pretty conservative. In fact, one of the things that the debate was strange in some ways because I kept asking for specifics on what we were going to debate. And they would give me these wishy-washy answers. But since this was the Chamber of Commerce, I wanted to focus on economic issues. I didn't want to get into culture war issues. And I noticed like throughout the conversation, there was this constant tug of war between me and Ben over setting what the narrative was going to be or setting what the whole debate was supposed to be about. And I kept trying to move it back to economy related issues. As soon as the critical race theory topic came up, like his eyes lit up, and I'm like, this is
Right.
I mean, this is his dream. This is what he wants to talk
That
about.
that
And the audience
moderator.
reacted favorably to his critical race theory stuff. So that made me think that they're pretty conservative too, socially.
Yeah, that moderator was I think that moderator cut off your answer like almost every time. There was one question where I remember he cut Ben off to move to the next one, but every other time it felt like he would let Ben get the last word or let you get half of a last word in. And some of those questions, yeah, like critical race theory. I mean, okay, wait, hold on. Before we move on, just final
Mhm.
question. Everyone's asking: were they serving adrenochrome in like little silver dish platters, or was it not? Was it that not that high level? You know?
I wasn't paying close attention. The meal was served right before the debate. And I mean, I don't know about you. I'm not really hungry or paying attention during a debate, but no, I don't think they did. I don't think it was that high level.
Gotcha. Okay, okay, no, just you know, many people are saying this. I really, really enjoyed the debate. You know, I talk about Ben Shapiro a lot. You know, not because I find him particularly interesting, but because you know, algorithmically, I know that he draws a lot of attention, and I think that his arguments are a good like poster child for what the right's going to talk about at any given point in time. And when the debate started, I worried like Ben argues in my opinion, aggressively bad faith. I mean, he'll redirect the conversation to any like pivot or talking point. He's not interested in talking about this stuff. It's just prepared, speeches and whatever he can sort of redirect the issue to. But I think you actually kicked ass out there, honest to God. And I
Thank
tend to
you.
be pretty, skeptical about this stuff.
Yeah, the one thing that I was struggling with was I wanted to frame things in a way that immediately took it back to economic issues, because the last thing I wanted to do was get into a debate regarding manufactured culture war topics. And I knew that that was his wheelhouse. I knew that's where he wanted to go. So there were a few answers where it's not that I didn't like the answers. It's just that I tried to frame it in an economic policy perspective. And it started off a little weird, but I hope like by the end of my answer, people kind of understood where I was going. I actually think the best part of the debate was not the main event, because there were actually 3 debates in one night. The first one was a 30-minute closed door debate for Chamber of Commerce members who are like high paying members, I guess. So that wasn't filmed. That was mostly a back and forth about COVID and vaccine mandates.
Mhm.
To be honest, super boring. So I don't really care that it was only open to a few people. The main event was the main event. I'm sure that's what you're referring to mostly. But then after that, there was another 30 minutes for the virtual Chamber of Commerce members who weren't there in person. And that was where we really got into it regarding economic policy. And that was my favorite part. And I had forgotten about it until one of my friends brought it up, and I watched the video. I'm like, yeah, I think I really kicked ass in this section. So I don't know if you saw that, but
No,
it
well,
was
I'll give it a look then. No, I just I only knew about the main one. I could feel your push and pull though, trying to keep it to econ issues. That's what I've noticed with the right wing. It's that I don't think they really want to talk about econ stuff, because when they do, they have like 3 or 4 talking points about not encouraging entitlement culture, and past that, they are just absolutely lost. Because of course, the real interest of the conservative party in this country, and to a large extent the Democrats as well, but let's focus on the Republicans, is prioritizing the wealthy, and they don't have great arguments for that. So you always redirect. It's like the immigration argument, Why are the jobs going away? Well, we can't talk about regulations or outsourcing, obviously. We can't talk about a UBI or welfare state. We have to talk about immigrants. Somehow they're taking the jobs. And then it becomes a culture war issue. So you want to talk about taxes, and Ben Shapiro gets to field a question about trans children taking vaccine mandates in bathrooms or so. And
yeah,
he grimaces. He's like, yes, I'm ready for this one.
yeah.
It must be infuriating dealing with that to such a large audience too.
It was and it wasn't. So I'm actually pretty grateful that the audience was nothing like a Politicon audience. Politicon is just a bloodbath. The whole point is a bloodbath, and that's it. It's a blood sport. Whereas this audience did not agree with me, did not like anything I had to say. However, they were cordial, they were respectful. And so I just did my best in trying to frame arguments in a way that would be appealing to them, which is why I kept going back to the issue of childcare. Childcare is something that they benefit from, especially considering the fact that there's a labor shortage with a giant population of women who haven't been able to go back to work because they can't afford childcare. So, it was a weird thing to keep going back to in any other context. But the reason why I was doing it is because I was trying to frame it in a way that they would understand. But regardless of whether they understood it or not, they were respectful, and I was able to say what I needed to say. I didn't hold back. Very clearly stated that I would ban private schools, which
Right,
they
right.
don't like,
Based.
And so a lot of people online were coming at me for even agreeing to do the debate,
Mhm.
because they argue, well, if you're critical of like Jimmy Dore or Glenn Greenwald going on Tucker Carlson's show, how can you do this debate with Ben Shapiro? And it's like, no, we're talking about 2 different things. If I went to the Chamber of Commerce and I just agreed with everything Ben was saying and argued that low taxes for the rich was A-okay, then we're having a conversation about me being hypocritical. But that's not what happened. Clearly, I went there to vehemently disagree with Ben, especially on economic issues.
Yeah, I think this ties back to what you said earlier about the left being an echo chamber. The only people who we allow to escape that echo chamber are people who aren't on the left at all. I really enjoy your bonfire on Twitter, talking about that, because I've always been, I'm sure I've always been a big advocate for being able to talk with people you disagree with, because I think that in many ways the left is very rhetorically weak, and we shouldn't be, because I think we're right on virtually everything, we have to say. But we don't practice the skills necessary to deliver these arguments. So especially back in like 2016, 2017, there were like no people on the left outside of admittedly the Young Turks and some groups like that were capable of really representing these arguments, which is why you had videos of Ben Shapiro debating college students and getting like 70 million views on that. I think
Right.
this is a positive turn because I think that scene is kind of passé now. And the fact that Ben had you up there rather than, and I'm sure he would have loved this if he could, a 19-year-old freshman, sociology undergrad, I think that speaks to the fact that we have to be taken a bit more seriously in direct confrontation, which is absolutely to our benefit.
Absolutely. I think that refusing to engage in these debates demonstrates weakness. And even if you're not a weak person, it certainly comes off as weak. And I'm not in any way intimidated regarding debate, especially with someone like Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro could be a challenging person to debate because while I disagree with him on the policies, I think he is wrong on the policies. Like the substance is very different from the skill of debating.
Mhm.
You could be completely unknowledgeable, completely wrong on the issues, but if you have good debating skills, you know how to use all the tricks, then you come across as the winner, right? And so I knew that I knew I was going into this situation in hostile territory with a guy who's known as a good debater. But I think one of the tactics that I used, and I don't know if this is something you use because I know you debate a lot, you don't have to respond to everything, right? So he has this trick of like, blah, 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 like he just like makes a billion different points. There's no cohesion. They don't really connect. And you could try to respond to every single little thing he said, but I think that's a losing strategy. So for me, it was, what's the most significant point he's trying to make here? And let me debunk it, or let me respond to it in a way that gives a different perspective that I think is more accurate. So yeah, that was pretty much what I did with him, because he is a fast talker and he speaks confidently. And for a lot of people who might not be well versed in policy or politics, he could come across as someone who's completely right, even if he's not. So I wanted to be very cognizant of that going in.
No, for sure, and I completely agree. Yeah, it goes beyond a gish gallop where you're trying to throw out 20 arguments to discombobulate them. But I think that it's a very deliberate strategy where they'll respond to what you say, but it's kind of like a sandwich they're building, where the bread and the lettuce and such, everything but the meat, is a bad argument that they're baiting you into responding to. So they'll make really dumb bait comments that usually they're not substantive enough that you can really like own them in a response. They're just kind of dumb things that you feel like you have to correct. But in doing so, they cloak the actual weak point, which is usually any talking point they actually have that they make in response to the point that you made. Um, no, I think just an awareness of stuff like that, and it's for reasons like that that I think we need to be advocates for our ability to have these debates. Seeing people criticize you after the fact was very frustrating, in part because I relate to it heavily because I'm always getting these same criticisms. Like you shouldn't be talking to these people. You're platforming that. Like yeah, okay, Ben Shapiro. Never heard of him until. So thanks for that, I guess, for letting that loose on the world. But when I argue against that, I come off as kind of like like a debate obsessed, like internet boy or whatever. But you're established, you have long-standing media credentials. I think that you add a lot more legitimacy to the idea that we should be able to front these arguments, and to such a huge audience, to such a huge figure too. I mean, I don't know what a person would have to be on to look at that and think like, oh yeah, this is exactly like that time that Glenn Greenwald said that Tucker Carlson's the only real socialist in America. It's like
Right.
I'm seeing double here.
Right. And I think the issue that we're talking about regarding the left goes a lot further than engaging in discussions with the other side or with right wingers. Something that I find super unappealing about the online left, and I don't think this is indicative of the left overall, but certainly like the loud online left, is this notion that like you need to be skeptical of everyone, even if they're on our side, and if there's any perceived wrongdoing by that individual, they must be blacklisted and you should never talk to them again. And so, look, I'll just keep it real. I retweeted your tweet about this whole interaction that we're having now. And I knew it was going to happen. Inevitably, there's comments about like, how could you talk to Vaush, Vaush this, Vaush that? Like, don't police me. Don't tell me who I can and can't talk to. Like, it reminds me of my mother, like giving me these ridiculous rules when I was a kid, and I would ignore those rules. And I'm going to do the same thing in this regard, right? Like, don't tell me as an adult, as a 35-year-old woman, I'm not allowed to have a conversation with Vaush because you don't like him. Ben Burgess is a really, really good friend of mine. And like, there's a person, he's a good guy. I'm sure he doesn't mean anything bad by it, but he's constantly like messaging me about like, did you see what Ben said? Are you still his friend? And it's like, why are you, Ben's allowed to have his opinion. I don't agree with everything he says, but why do you get pleasure off of me no longer being friends with Ben Burgess? It's like so weird and random. Like, I hate that kind of stuff, and we need to like really knock it off.
No, I completely agree. And you know what? I am both the product and the recipient of that behavior, because in my effort to speak to people that aren't just like, flat across the board progressive leftists, I often get in shit for being associated with them, and people get in shit. Okay, wait, hold on. This actually just happened 2 days ago. I spoke to a youth branch of the leftist Netherlands party, which had recently broke off due to internal infighting. It's a leftist group, of course, obviously,
Of course.
But I talked with them on Zoom for like 2 hours a couple of days ago, and I found out the day afterwards that there was another lefty group there that canceled their participation at a housing protest because they were angry that the group I talked to was also there and they had talked to me. Like, these are real activists that canceled like participation at a and I'm thinking, like, how could you have you talked to a normal human? Okay, a normal human, like in the West, has, I'll tell you, probably not the best and most progressive views on race or trans issues. Can you speak to them? Do you only speak in the online forums with people as left as you? Would you have denounced Marx as a revisionist? Like, but we do this everywhere and at every level, you know?
Yeah.
You at TYT, you guys are always getting shit for not being as radically far left as some of the more like recent populist branches that, let's be fair, really only seem to exist after Bernie Sanders inspired them, whereas you guys have been going on for well over a decade, well past that, you know? Does that, I mean, that constant infighting, you know, like, how do you push through that?
I've just gotten to a point where you have to ignore it. And TYT is not a monolith. You know, I just want to address that quickly, because there are gradations in political ideology at TYT. I mean, everyone for the most part is on the left, but I would argue that my politics differs from Cenk's politics. And if you watch the show regularly, I think it's pretty notable and noticeable. But people like to think of TYT or any organization as monolithic, and that's a huge problem. I also think there's a problem on the left of people just regurgitating what their favorite hosts say. So if Jimmy, for instance, claims that we're pro forever wars, then they just say that we're pro forever wars. And it's like, did you do even a little bit of an investigation into what our commentary has been on various foreign policy issues? And I just think like the mindlessness of all of that is such a huge problem. And at the end of the day, it makes the left the most unwelcoming and unbearable place to be. And it sucks, because these are all like personal issues that we really need to like get over, rise above, and focus on what we're really trying to accomplish. Otherwise, we're going to keep getting stuck in these ridiculous battles that mean nothing. It's all egotistical nonsense.
Yeah. I guess we all really are in a forever war then, in a way. Yeah,
Like it.
well, I mean, the Jimmy thing's on you. If you really wanted to, you know, end that line of criticism, you could stop being for forever wars and start being for forever gassing your own citizens, and then you would have kind of a
Right.
you'd let up on that real quick. I think I think that yeah, it's the ability to work with people with whom you share some disagreements is essential for that base building, because you know we should learn from our enemies. The right is exceedingly good at doing this. You know, there are neo-Nazis who will just stay quiet for a bit and work with moderate Republicans. The
Mhm.
people on the left do not do this. We are constitutionally incapable. There is not this like movement of like Marxists who are like, quietly working within the Democratic Party. They're all loud and on Twitter. They can't. It's not about being dishonest. It's just like coalition building, you know. Or maybe I disagree on some of this stuff, but I agree that we should at least work together on this, that, or the other. But it's always with the ideological purity testing. And when we see that happen on the right, that's when we laugh at them because their movements fail. After Charlottesville didn't work, we saw infighting in the alt-right, and a bunch of
Right.
groups all pointed at each other. And 2 months later, they're irrelevant. The alt-right's gone now. Now you have this weird like QAnon MAGA cult left, but the alt-right, as it was known, just kind of broke apart. That infighting stuff is toxic to movements, and we wonder why we never win. Um,
Yep.
so with you say there's a lot of ideological a dissonance within, not dissonance, that seems like a negative word. There's contrast within TYT, you know.
Mhm.
This has become, I think, something of a running joke because, as you may or may not be aware, some less than favorable political characters have emerged from TYT at some point, during its operation. Worst of all, Hassan, of course, but I'm sure of a few others. I have to wonder because I don't often get a chance to ask like directly. Do you think there's something about the internal culture at TYT where the big tent might be a little too big and it sort of lets lets people in when there might be warning signs they're not authentically left? Or do you think it's just a product of, if TYT is going to do this for long enough, statistically some people are going to drift off?
Yeah, so I think that the center of the problem, if you want to consider it a problem, is I think, overall goal that Cenk Uygur, who is still the CEO of the company, like what he's trying to accomplish. And by nature of what he's trying to accomplish, there's going to be a lot of damage, right? Because inevitably you're going to end up running into people who are narcissistic and self-interested and are really just doing this to enrich themselves. And so, and by the way, this is something that I go back and forth on because I've been at TYT since '07. I've been there since the pay was absolutely awful, getting paid barely anything. We were working out of a building that was like so dilapidated and awful that like we had sewer water dripping on our desks. There were only 5 people working there. I was the only woman for like 5 years straight. Like it was, by the way, like the conditions, because the company had like no money, were pretty bad. But the reason why I was there was because I loved the core of what we were doing, right? I saw it as no other option. I was working at CBS Radio when I first started working at TYT, and I was so miserable at CBS. It was awful. It was nothing like I had envisioned a newsroom to be. And the reason why I stayed with TYT and quit that pretty cushy CBS gig is because I love the idea of being able to speak freely on issues that matter. And I also identified as a progressive. And I just love that Cenk was as transparent about all of that as he was. So anyway, so we work really hard. We build this company. It's finally somewhat profitable. And the second that happens, Cenk is like, okay, great. We're going to expand. We're going to hire more people. And I'm like, but why? But why? We worked really hard. We're finally stable. Like, why don't we like pay ourselves finally? Like, by the way, I'm not even enmeshed in like the business side of things, but Cenk and I are really close friends and I always have questions and he, always indulges me in answering those questions. And he'd be like, Anna, it's not about us. It's not about us getting rich or whatever. This is about building something. There's no successful left media in the United States, and we need to grow to the point where we're a real competitor to the CNNs and the MSNBCs and all of that. And he has stayed true to that vision, despite all of the very serious personal costs that come along with that. And I've been kind of irritated with it, but I also believe in the vision. So inevitably, as you're trying to like build new shows around, progressives and leftists, you're unfortunately going to run into people who lie about who they really are, lie about what they're trying to accomplish. And that's certainly what happened with Dave Rubin. That's what happened with Jimmy. I mean, remember, Jimmy was the one who presented himself as like the most progressive. He hosted a show called Aggressive Progressives on TYT. And so, look, I saw warning signs with Jimmy for years, mostly because he was, I don't know, sexually harassing me at work. But I kept that stuff to myself for
That
the
is a
most
big
part.
warning sign. You know,
Yeah,
that's definitely up there.
I kept the sexual harassment stuff to myself. But I will say, like, both me and I'm not going to name who else because I don't know if he wants me to, but another person at the company was warning Jank like incessantly about Jimmy. But Jank projects his goodness onto other people, and he just couldn't see it until it was too late. And so it is what it is.
Yeah, it sounds like an incredibly difficult situation. I don't want to cheapen its severity by commenting when I don't have all the info. I mean, like obviously in terms of the general strokes of, I think you know who I like and who I don't like. So, you know, that's my broader perspective is no, but beyond that, I you know, at least it was simple with Dave Rubin, right? I mean, for him, like a water droplet probably hit his head at the wrong angle, and he just had an ideological paradigm shift right like that, you know. He maybe
Totally.
like stubbed his toe or something. I have no idea. So just something got knocked around. Yeah, it's a lot of people have run through TYT. It's a big org. I do very much respect the desire to produce something which can compete with big media. And I think in a way, like I think in a way, like maybe that's an impossible dream. I mean, it's big media, right? But I feel like the Young Turks has gotten awfully close because when people talk about the Young Turks, they don't really talk about you guys like independent media, even though technically you are, you know. You're almost like the most mainstream independent media, or maybe the most independent mainstream media. And
Mhm.
I know that because of how I think of you guys too, you know. When I watch something from TYT, I never think about it in the same way that I think about something produced by the Daily Wire, which seems like a cabal of grifters sort of lassoed together, or just any other like YouTube or online group. It feels like it has that foundation or that authenticity, um, which is I think one of the things that people find so captivating about it. Why you take so many shots and also get so much attention. Um,
Thank you for
oh,
saying
sorry.
that. I really appreciate that because there was a period of time where, and it was when Jimmy was with us, and so I can understand why people would say this, that like we were the left-wing version of InfoWars, and every time someone said that, like I wanted to slip my wrists. I'm like, I've failed in life. I've made all the wrong decisions. I do not want to be the left wing version of anything like compared to like
No,
InfoWars, you know?
I'm the left wing version of Infowars. Okay, I took I that's mine now.
No,
Okay,
definitely not.
no. God no. I have had disagreements with stuff said on the TYT network for sure. But I mean, first of all, I know I don't ideologically align with everyone who works there, so that's inevitable. That's going to happen, you know, to anyone anywhere. But also, no, I just don't think that. I wanted to ask you too, because like I'm really curious about your thoughts on independent media. You know, we've seen this huge surge of people getting their news from online, and a lot of them do it watching, you know, Fox News, Tucker Carlson, whatever. But a lot of them do it from watching, well, people like me, or they watch YouTubers, or they watch like Vice or Vox documentaries and stuff like that. And on one hand, I think that's incredible because so much attention now can be paid to issues that mainstream media will never cover, and in ways they wouldn't cover it either. You know, not everyone's out for watching an anchor in a suit read from a teleprompter. Um, and again, that's the authenticity of TYT because you all don't do that. On the other hand, though, like we see, like people can just say anything on this platform. People could just say absolutely anything with no accountability. They could just lie. They don't even have to delete videos. They can just say, "Oh, I never said that," and their audience won't check them. Nobody cares. There are no standards. The FCC isn't here. They can just do whatever they want. Do you think the rise of independent media has been good for our political literacy?
It's a mixed bag. It really is a mixed bag. I think it's, and it's a difficult issue to really grapple with because I'm not in favor of censorship,
Mhm.
but at the same time I do see just how pervasive disinformation is. I mean, just take a look at what's happened with COVID and how dishonest actors decided to turn it into a culture war issue from the very beginning. And as a result, you have people dying in this country who didn't need to die, but were just absolutely convinced that the vaccine was more damaging or harmful than not being vaccinated. So like the disinformation is terrifying. I've kind of gotten to a point where rather than letting it get me down as much as it did before, I'm just very protective of like the circle around me, my own family. So the second my mom, for instance, like expressed some skepticism regarding the vaccine, put her in a headlock and I'm like, you're going to get the vaccine, you know, just making sure that
Just
the people
black bag her immediately into the van. We're off to the Walgreens. You're getting your shot.
Now, luckily, when Meghan McCain threw a hissy fit on The View over not being able to access the vaccine early, that persuaded my mom. Like, she's like, oh, the elites want it, the rich people want it, then I'm going to get it. So I didn't have to do much, choke holding or anything like that. But, it's just control what you can control and do your best to just rebut any of the disinformation that you see. Do your best in trying to inform people. That's really the only thing I can do. Overall, I think that the positive benefits of independent media outweigh the negative stuff that we've been seeing. At least I'd like to think that. But one of the more, I don't know if you saw this video, I saw it last night and I was just dying. I was like in bed right before I was going to sleep. My husband's dead asleep and I'm just cracking up. There's this guy, I forget the name of his show. He's this bald guy who interviewed Noam Chomsky recently. And he decided to ask Noam Chomsky about like ridiculous online drama. And I was both laughing, but felt so deeply embarrassed by all of it, because here you have Noam Chomsky, regardless of what you think about him personally, one of the greatest minds of our time, getting asked about online feuds between by the way, I'm part of that, right? You're total irrelevant garbage and he's getting asked about it. I think about those types of situations and I don't know, I'm just like, maybe there needs to be just a minimal level of journalistic training, like something.
Professor Chomsky, listen, okay? So Nicki Minaj so she tweeted about her cousin's friend, okay? So their balls were what are your opinions on? Yeah, exactly. No, I think at this point it's halfway to an internet meme where people will email Professor Chomsky about like their Tumblr like OC fan art account. They'll be like, "Sir, what is your opinion on that?" And he'll respond. He'll be like, I think you should stop talking to Becky. She seems like a toxic influence in your friend group. I love him. I assume this is how he keeps himself from dying instantly. Like he probably sleeps for 3 hours a day, and from like waking to falling asleep, he has to respond to emails because he needs that cognitive line being kept through with, or it all just shuts down like a car engine that if you turn it off, it'll never come back on.
No, it's pretty incredible. It's incredible.
It is. It's very funny, but it's also there is a huge degree in like seriousness between what we used to have and what we have now, and in a way, I almost miss that because I am not a fan of like stodgy, civility politics. Please, it's not what we do here, but I do like it when people at least care about the things they talk about, and it's not buried behind 14 layers of drama and like irony poisoning. And because online media will trend towards sensationalism in ways that might even be more like immediate and severe than what you see online. Because online, I mean, they're not like running around like screaming at each other at the news set, we might be moving past like seriousness when it comes to our coverage of these political issues, moving past the idea that arguments have any meaning and just towards this sort of nihilistic power vacuum where whoever can grab the most attention at any point in time will command the culture war narrative. And that thought is very concerning to me because I feel like fear and sensationalism, which the right is good at, will often win out over whatever emotions we can manifest with our arguments,
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a problem. It's a problem today. It's a problem every morning when we're having our production meeting and we're deciding what to put in the show, because inevitably there will be a few of those feud type stories. I mean, it's never about random people on the internet. Like, who gives a shit about that? But it's, perfect example, back when Meghan McCain was on The View, right? And she would say some pretty outlandish things. It's not that I despise those stories because sometimes they could be entertaining, but in the grand scheme of things, does it really matter? No, but people love it. You know, when members of your core audience are sending you links to those types of stories because they're like excited about hearing your take on it, what are you going to do? Not cover it? But again, if you take a step back, I mean, I try to do a decent job balancing the substance with some of the fun stuff. I don't always get it right. I think that I lean a little too heavily in the let's do our fourth mansion political corruption story of the day, and everyone else is like, "Oh, can we just like,
yeah,
can we loosen it
let's
up a little bit?"
go. Yeah, down the hill. No,
Yeah,
I totally get. No, we need people doing that, you know. Nobody
yeah.
on the right cares about any of this. So they don't it's not even in their political agenda because political literacy isn't a goal of theirs. But I cannot for the life of me do stuff like that. Whenever I'm trying to cover stuff in Washington, like I don't even think I've talked about the reconciliation bill in my channel, you know. I look at it and I think I should really talk about this. And then I turn the stream on and I'm thinking, ugh, it's all so disappointing and we
It's so
can't
bad.
change anything and it's and so I talk about anything else. So I think that balance, like your discipline, is very necessary because in its absence, you know, it's just gonna be Nicki Minaj cousin balls. Which fun as that is, I don't know how helpful that is to the to the movement.
I mean, I really did enjoy the testy conversation. So that I would not put that in the category of nonsense stories because like there's a point to covering that, right? I mean, here you have this massive public figure who is telling on an acquaintance who very likely had an affair and got an STD, but thinks that the swollen balls have something to do with like the vaccine. Like it's the vaccine stuff, debunking it is really, really important. So I didn't mind that. But I don't, who genuinely cares about Whoopi Goldberg, Joy Behar feuding with Meghan McCain? Like, who cares, right? It doesn't really matter. But turns out a lot of people care. Those videos go bananas. Like the number of views on those videos versus like any video we do on the reconciliation bill, the comparison is night and day.
Yeah. You know, I was looking at Ben Shapiro's channel about a couple of weeks ago, and I was taking a look at his coverage of stuff going on in Washington, and it was like 100,000, 150,000 views per video, which, don't get me wrong, is good, but it's Ben Shapiro. And then he had YouTube shorts of him reacting to trans TikToks, 1.3 million,
Yep.
1.6 million. It's like, okay, well, clear. Well, I guess I know what the American people care about, and it sure as shit is not politics, or it's not, at the very least, it's not anything that matters to their actual lived experiences. There's this old line in the left where it's like Bernie said this a lot, you know, the people don't care about this, that people care about jobs, they care about, you know, healthcare, they care about, like, stuff like that, you know, basic material needs. Honestly, I think they would care about those things if they had them, but in the absence of having them, and in the absence of knowing they ever can have them, I feel like what they care about is whether or not trans kids can do the Fortnite flossing dance in the bathrooms of their chosen gender. I think that's what Americans, at least algorithms seem to determine that's what Americans care about if you put them up to it.
I think during times of great economic anxiety, what you tend to see is people who feel powerless resorting to looking at other people who have less power to feel better about themselves. I think that's what we're seeing. I think that there's a lot to that, especially when it comes to the transgender community, especially when it comes to immigrants, Black people. Like, I just think that because of the precarity of a lot of white people's economic situations, like it's just this, I don't know if they like know it. I think it might be subconscious, but it's just this like feeling of, man, I'm not in a good position, but at least I'm not as powerless as this group. And then there's like this weird effort to keep those who are even less powerful, like in an even worse situation, down, like not helping them, not seeing them as like your fellow American, fellow human. Let's work together and actually like join forces to fight the real people who are suppressing us. But look, there's a very well-oiled machine on the right that keeps perpetuating these narratives of fear and very clear attempt to disgust people. Like you see that on Tucker Carlson's show all the time.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of funding behind that as well. So I'm not trying to make excuses for bad people thinking and doing bad things, but what I do think there's a psychology behind it. And it doesn't really do us any favors to indulge them in those discussions in any way. Like I think the only thing that really works is mocking them and making it abundantly clear that these are all very intentionally manufactured culture wars. That's it. They're all distractions to make you hate your fellow American, as opposed to focus on all of the shitty things that are happening at the very top that keep people in these precarious situations.
No, I completely agree, and I think that that speaks back earlier to your strategy where you try to redirect it back to those econ issues. Because I've noticed that, when you talk to some of these guys, these culture war talking points that they manufacture, they're like it's like the flu. I mean, it's seasonal. Critical race theory has its spike, but then it's
Yeah,
down. You had your Dr. Seuss, you have your what was it, the trans potato head, non-binary potato head. But it's ancient now, right? That wasn't
right.
even a year ago. Nobody talks about it. Nobody remembers. Nobody cares. The trans bathroom bills, too. You take a look at when these get their spikes. What are left issues? Like medical care, war. These are permanent, ongoing things. Maybe they get talked about more at this point or the other, but we never forget. People on the right, sometimes you'll be like, oh, well, what about when you guys talked about X? And they'll like blink. They'll be like, oh, that's right. I did care about that very much 7 months ago. That's right. Let's go back to that then. It's
Right.
the mockery is essential, I think, because it's so obvious how uninterested they are in talking about meaningful issues. And do people do sometimes get baited into like this like line in the sand, heels on the ground, like defending every culture war talking point, which you can, but you should at least contextualize it. I'm only talking about this because you've made me. I don't care. Nobody cared until you decided people had to care, and you will forget within a month. So you memorize all these talking points for nothing. I mean, an AdSense boost, maybe. Um,
Hmm.
which I mean, it does get tiring, but I guess it keeps us young. The with regards to I guess with regards to combating that and focusing on those meaningful issues, you're probably way more plugged into what's happening. You're definitely way more plugged into what's happening in Washington right now. Do you have any particular optimism for meaningful change within Biden's presidency? Or
No.
okay, simple as that. Yep, no, okay, all right. Happy to hear that.
Um, and I'll tell you why. I mean, it's not based on me just being a pessimistic person, although I am a pessimistic person. And just recently on the show, I admitted that I was angry at myself for allowing myself to be naive enough to think that Democrats were really going to accomplish a robust reconciliation package. They're not. They've already agreed to cut all sorts of incredibly important provisions, pertaining to climate change, pertaining to paid family leave. They whittled it down from 12 weeks to 4 weeks. And now, because Manchin doesn't even want 4 weeks, they're going to cut it completely out of the package.
Oh,
I
it's
mean,
your data's late. It's negative now. You actually have to work more when giving child. Yeah, really rough stuff.
honestly, you say it as a joke, but Democrats are so pathetic that I wouldn't be surprised. Like at this point, nothing would surprise me regarding their failures. And, when you criticize Democrats accurately, by the way, there's this assumption that you're taking it easy on the right, but the right is so far gone and so awful that it's like, is it really worth having a discussion about the right? There's no saving the right. The right wing is in like Trump territory. They still think that he was they still think he won the election.
Mm.
Like, I'm not wasting my time criticizing Republicans because Republicans are a lost cause. But the Democratic Party ran on really differentiating itself from Trump, right? Trump was this massive threat. And to be sure, I agree, Trump was a massive threat. However, you can't run on, we're going to reverse the Trump era tax cuts. And then once you have power in both the executive branch and Congress, then turn around and say, no, we're actually going to keep those Trump era tax cuts in place for the rich, right?
Yeah, you have to
Um,
be. I mean, they would have to be honest, right? What they if they could run on like, I'm not Trump. I won't do more bad things, but I also won't do much in the way of good things either. We'll just kind of we'll drive a stake in the ground and halt the country's decay. or slow it at least for a couple of years, and then after that, it's back to the slip and slide that you were on. It's no,
Yeah.
yeah, no, I completely agree. This is you don't self-describe as a socialist, right?
I mean, I don't really. What would qualify someone as a socialist? I want someone to answer that
You
question
need a
because
flag in your bedroom and a hat, the one with the fur on the side, you know?
I don't have any flags posted anywhere in my house. So so
Oh,
no. I can tell you what my ideology is. I don't know if that qualifies as socialism. I think that large sectors of the economy should be decommodified. I believe in worker co-ops, and I think that there is room for markets in some cases. But other than that, like that's my ideology,
okay.
right? So
No,
yeah,
I think that's cool.
yeah,
There's a line that I like to push because I feel like I have to be an advocate for optimism sometimes. Liberals, of which there are many in the TYT audience, I feel like tend to be very optimistic about the state of things politically. Trump is very bad, but Trump is an aberration. He's a deviation from a otherwise fairly functional system. Whereas I think leftists are constantly in a state of like near paralysis from despair. So I talk about how, in many ways, Biden's failures can be beneficial to the left because when Trump does bad stuff while in office, what does the average Democrat think? Or even the independent who doesn't vote Democrat but doesn't like Trump? They think, well, Trump is very bad. So if you get a Democrat in office, then things will go back to normal. Then once you have that Democrat in office and things don't really get that much better, that's when the gears start turning in their head and they think, okay, well maybe the solution lies outside of the binary I'm presented. I think that attitude is the reason why Bernie Sanders nearly won the primary after 8 years of Obama, because things didn't really change that much under Obama, right? I mean, we recovered from 2008, but apart from that, I guess the mandate was fine. Certainly not the transformative presidency that he described when he was campaigning. So people got fed up with it, I think, and Bernie nearly won. But after 4 years of Trump, Bernie did worse in 2020 than he did in
yeah.
2016 because people are afraid again. They're afraid. They want anything but Trump. Even if they have to settle for Biden, as long as they think he's got the best shot of winning, they'll take anything. And it's that fear, I think, that the Democratic Party plays off of and the
Yep.
Democratic base responds to anything but Republicans. And as long as we keep doing that, this is what we're going to get. 4 years of a slip and slide, then 4 years of standstill until the next slip and slide. And we never move out of that system until something catastrophically bad happens.
Well, the electorate has definitely changed as well because many of those blue collar voters are now on the right, even though it doesn't really make much sense. And I think part of the reason why that's the case is because you have the right wing, beginning with Trump, paying lip service to the economic anxieties that they might be facing, right? Pretending to actually give a damn about those things. Whereas the Democratic Party, I mean, you see it, it's pretty brazen. It's the PMC, right? It's the professional managerial class. They're people who might be socially liberal, but they're all professionals making decent money and they don't really care too much for tax increases and things like that, right? And they think, hey, things have been good for me under Democratic administrations. What's the problem? Like, but you look at Obama's presidency, especially the financial reform that was passed under his watch, and what it did was accelerate inequality in the country. Yes, there was a recovery, but it was an uneven recovery. And one of the worst things that happened under the Obama administration that he doesn't get enough crap for is the monetary policy that's being continued, by the way, by the Federal Reserve, right? That has accelerated inequality, especially when it comes to the housing market. I mean, just pumping money into banks with the hope that that liquidity will be passed down to people like us or small businesses is ridiculous. That is not what happened at all because there was no legislation written to indicate that that added liquidity would go to ordinary Americans. It just went to stock buybacks and it went to banks buying up residential property and either flipping it or turning them into rentals. And so when you see the housing prices explode the way they have, that wasn't some accident. That was very much part of an intentional policy passed under Obama's watch. And so the anger that I think a lot of workers feel toward the Democratic Party is real because they've experienced that inequality firsthand. But the Democratic voters who remain might be repulsed by Republicans, but they don't really have a problem with the inequality that's taking place. They fared pretty well under Obama, you
And
know?
it's really about how you frame that that impotence too, you know? Because Democrats do it in the most pathetic way. Democrats will talk about, you know, this transformative change towards
Yeah.
society where they're going to rebuild everything. And then like they get into power and they just kind of twiddle their thumbs. They never become fiery advocates for the things they care about. They just get kind of quiet about all the stuff they know they're not going to be able to do. And they're just like, yeah, well, we're not Republicans, so and then they concede and they concede and they concede, and then eventually the Republican rolls in. And Trump, look, despise him. Not this is not a compliment to his skills as a president, but he was a passionate advocate for the things he said he was going to do. Was he ever actually going to finish building that wall? No, that was never going to happen. But he talked about it 17 times a week. Anytime you give the guy a microphone, he will scream into it about every single thing he's fighting to do. And what that gives people the impression of is that the reason why he can't do it isn't because he's some incompetent bureaucrat who doesn't actually care about these issues. It's because the Democrats are stopping him from doing it, which in a lot of cases is what happened. So he cemented the Republicans' hatred of the Democratic Party, and the independents who were amicable towards Trump also felt a sort of a portion, like a fragment of that. But Biden doesn't do this. When Manchin and Sinema like hold up massive progressive legislation, Biden's like quietly behind the scenes, fiddling, talking to people, and maybe he'll publicly denounce one of them by saying he disagrees. I mean, it's nothing. He doesn't, I'm not expecting the guy to go out there and be Fred Hampton, but he could at the very least give his voters the impression that their party is sincere in its advocacy for certain things. But of course, he can't because they aren't. So,
Right.
so here
Yeah.
we are, I guess.
No, you're absolutely right about that. There's a story that I produced for today's show about the reconciliation package, and Manchin was, catching up with reporters, and he just happened to mention that Joe Biden has a nickname for him, JoJo. And I was like, I don't give a fuck about your nickname, bro. Like, and
Thank
the
you.
fact that like Joe Biden is giving you a bunch of cookies, like that doesn't give me a favorable view of Joe Biden. It makes me pretty angry about him. And he hasn't used any sticks. I don't think he plans on using any sticks, which makes me question whether he even really believed in his own Build Back Better agenda. And I mean, the reconciliation bill is now just a shell of what it used to be. All of the incredibly popular and important provisions have been stripped away. I would argue that progressives should stand their ground and block both the bipartisan bill and the reconciliation bill as it stands. I know that they're going to get a lot of heat and pushback for it, but are they going to fight for people,
We
or are
got
they
to
just
do
go
something.
along?
We can't let this happen forever and ever and ever, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. It's it's so disappointing. It's I again, it's not a compliment to Trump. You know, his passion, his fiery advocacy was both insincere and directed towards things that were objectively bad for the country. But if nothing else, I mean, it does excite a base. And Trump's legacy isn't going to be his policies. It's going to be that an entire 2 or 3 generations of Republicans are going to be that insane, you know, or
Yeah.
amicable to more insanity in the future. But what are Joe Biden voting Democrats taking with them into the future besides a vague sense of disappointment? I mean, Bernie Sanders wasn't even president, and people think more strongly of him than they ever will of Joe Biden because he clearly did care about the stuff that he talked about. And even if he
Right.
became president, you know, inshallah, even if he had, he probably wouldn't have been able to get all that done. But I know every time he was in front of a microphone, he would be denouncing the people in his way, and that would incite in the voter base something more powerful than just approval ratings or a single policy. It would build a lifelong movement, a lifelong entitlement to the things he said we all deserve. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's not the place we live right now. So yeah.
The only thing that really does give me hope, and it's, we're in the very, very beginning of it, and I hope the momentum continues to build. It's the labor activity that we're seeing, the John Deere strike, the threats of more strikes from workers in other sectors like nurses at Kaiser and all of that. Yes, it was a failed effort, but the Bessemer, Alabama unionization effort was another example, because there seems to be a class consciousness that did not exist 10 years ago, right? Or even honestly 8 years ago. Like I just feel like people have become more and more aware of how our economic system works, how things are set up. People are starting to understand what it means to be an exploited worker. They understand that it's not that your boss is actively vicious to you, but that you produce a lot more revenue for the company than you get in return in the form of pay or benefits. Like, I want people to think about those things and think about how those issues draw us all together, regardless of what our regardless of what our opinions are on social issues, right? Like, I'm not saying ignore the unsavory characters or ignore the awful bigoted characters. What I am saying, though, is there are people you're going to have disagreements with, both in the workplace, outside the workplace, but there is something that really binds us all together. And if we can just focus on those similarities, to band together, to have that broad coalition, to fight back against those who continue to like keep their boots on our necks, then we can accomplish amazing things. But the infighting, I mean, even among the socialist left online, is what takes that optimism away from me. So we got to fight back against that. We got to push through it.
We will overcome, hopefully.
Yeah.
I agree. Nothing has made me feel quite so good as seeing all those. They're all over social media, like the businesses posting signs going like, now hiring 3 cents an hour. Nobody wants to work anymore. Please come clean dishes at my giant like factory kitchen cheesecake factory, whatever. That does fill me with joy. I hope we do get more of that feeling, because the atomization, the individualization of exploitation has been one of the biggest hurdles to the left labor movement. The idea that, like you said, your boss has to be evil. No, your boss doesn't have to be evil. They just have to be a boss, really. That's pretty much step 1 and 2. I mean, if they are, then you've probably got a decent case against them doing something to you that is not your material interest. Hopefully we get that done. I know that you have an infinitely busier schedule than me, so I just want to say I really appreciate you coming on. Seriously, I have been a fan of what you've done and said for some time, and anytime you want to drop by, it would be my pleasure.
Thanks for having me, Vaush. This was a lot of fun.
You take care, and good luck with today's show.
Thank you so much. See you soon.
That's one of the best conversations you've had recently. Yeah, well, I like that there's a bit of a contrast too, because normally when I talk to people, they're like YouTubers, but I don't think of Ana Kasparian as a YouTuber. I mean, I guess maybe technically, but yeah, no, she's, yeah. If not explicitly in title and rank, then at the very least in form and function, she is like a big media professional. Yeah. Now get Anderson Cooper on you. Man, you're fiddling so much with your mustache. I just do that by default. Just sort of a default kind of behavior. I think a lot of people who have beards just tend to idly, push their beard hair around. Is it a nervous behavior? No, I just do it, I do it when I'm not talking with my hands, but I don't talk with my hands when I'm talking to people, That's why I normally talk with my hands when I'm talking to you guys. But yeah, it usually means I'm concentrating. How'd you get Anna on? Well, we've talked before, not on stream or anything, but we've talked like over DMs or whatever. I think there's a mutual respect there, so it was nice having her on, yeah. One of the gray names try to cancel you for platforming Anna. I'm sure I'll survive. And I feel like far more people will try to cancel Anna for talking to me. So my conclusions there are that socialism is good. Okay. I think I've got that. Yeah, I think that's about, yeah. Fucking nailed that one. Very good, very good.